WILPF, like everyone else in the peace movement at the moment, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, WILPF, we're on absolutely tender hooks to see whether the proposed ceasefire in Gaza is going to take off. Very, very nervous and anxious. I was actually on the streets last night when someone told us it had been proposed. But meanwhile, we've got to go on addressing, as we have done for 100 years, the root causes of conflict. And none is more important than the world climate crisis. Now, to this end, as an international NGO, WILPF sent representatives to the United Nations Conference of Parties, that's COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, last November. And Áine, who's with us tonight from our Scottish branch of WILPF, she was one of our international delegates. And it was 2 weeks, and she was there for one of the weeks. The first week, was it, Áine? Yeah. The first week. And she's been the secretary of the Scottish branch of WILPF since June 2023, and has also represented WILPF at the United Nations in Vienna and also in New York at the meeting of parties of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Now, at COP29, WILPF was emphasizing the need to shift resources from militarism to climate solutions. We were highlighting the disproportionate impact of the climate crisis and conflicts on women and marginalized communities, and the essential role of feminist leadership in shaping climate action. Now, today, Áine is going to be reporting back from COP29, and she'll discuss what she thinks were the best and worst of the conference. Now, we're recording this, and we've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time for Áine to make her presentation, and she's got slides, and then we've got quite a lot of time to have a discussion. We've allowed 90 minutes for the webinar. So welcome everyone. The floor is yours, Áine.
I will share my screen. Hello everyone. Lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Can everyone see my screen okay?
We can see your screen, but talk a bit louder.
Okie doke, perfect. Thank you so much. In this webinar, I'm going to be reporting back on the 29th UN Climate Change Conference, and we'll discuss the continued challenges and issues faced, as well as exploring potential opportunities for progress. So my notes are down here, that's why I'm not looking at you guys. So at COP29, I witnessed a pressing need for climate action being met with an unyielding and often actively regressive force consisting of fossil fuel lobbyists and global north countries. The climate crisis is the most pressing issue of our time. Yet, instead of making history and providing global south countries with adequate, flexible, feminist and grant-based funding, or providing tangible support for gender-sensitive climate initiatives, or redirecting military spending towards climate finance, instead, global north countries continued to silence indigenous voices and refused to accept responsibility for the damage they continue to cause today. The experience of being a climate activist today is context dependent, and so before I begin, I just want to recognise my privilege as a white, educated young woman from Scotland who can advocate without fear of government retaliation. The security that I enjoy in my home country is not unanimous. This was especially evident in Azerbaijan, where there's an appalling human rights record. local advocates that I met with face oppressive laws, torture, discrimination, prison, and even death. I'm really grateful to be safely speaking with you all this evening, and just want to acknowledge the brave local activists who did attend COP and played a vital role. So, started. It's a lot of text, but we're going to work through it, and they're not all this text heavy. So, why is climate change a feminist issue? Women, LGBTQI+ individuals, and Indigenous people are disproportionately impacted by militarism, conflict, and the climate crisis due to pre-existing social and economic inequalities. This is because these groups face already poverty, discrimination, and violence, which restricts their abilities to access resources and adapt to changing environmental circumstances. There's many ways that climate change disproportionately impacts women, including gender-based violence being consistently increasing during and after natural disasters, extreme weather events, and during and after conflict. Gender-based violence can lead to long-term consequences, such as physical injury.
I've been for the last couple of weeks, but I managed to go outside and have a bit of a walk down the river before the meeting, so that was really nice.
Someone's microphone is on.
Yeah, had a really good Christmas, quite
Could
chill.
you
Just kind of seeing different parts of my family and everything like that.
The admin of
That
the
was
meeting can turn it off.
And I will
Pat,
have
can you mute everyone?
Check in and then pass on to someone else once you checked in.
Thank you so much.
That'd be great.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you.
I've muted everybody. Could you unmute yourself, please, Áine?
Sorry about that. Great. Anyway, gender-based violence can lead to many awful things that you can see on the screen there, such as internalized stigma and external stigma, fertility issues, STIs, mental health conditions, and obviously ramifications for children as well. Women are more likely to experience climate-linked health impacts, such as for pregnant people, postpartum, and older women, extreme heat, and obviously being on the move. If you're a climate refugee, it puts you at a lot more danger. Women also predominantly take on most of the caring of other vulnerable groups, such as older family members and children, throughout this process. However, it's really important to note that women are not just victims of compounding conflict and climate impacts. They're also at the forefront of the climate and peace movements. During the conference, I learned that women's leadership in climate spaces and elsewhere is now more than ever imperative. Yet women's voices, especially those from communities in marginalized situations, were not adequately represented. Statistically, 8 out of the 78 world leaders participating at COP were women. UN Women shared that only 6 out of these leaders mentioned the impact of climate change on women and girls, and 4 out of those 6 were women. This continued underrepresentation of women leaders at COP29 was worrying, disappointing, and simply not good enough. Women are powerful agents of change, and their inclusion at the decision-making level, locally, nationally, and globally, is crucial. A representative from Chad stated that if you invest in women, you invest in the society. Achieving gender equality in climate negotiations and integrating gender equality into climate initiatives will make more just climate solutions. It's just a few of them. So whilst at COP29, WILPF's advocacy vision included the need to shift resources from militarism to climate solutions, highlights the disproportionate impact of the climate crisis and conflict on women and communities in marginalized situations, and recognize the essential role of feminist leadership in shaping climate action. Investing in a care economy, uplifting and prioritizing a feminist analysis, and implementing international disarmament agreements were also priorities. To meet these goals, quite lofty goals, myself and the other WILPF advocate, Áine, who is from WILPF Norway and was the Week 2 delegate, consistently provided high-quality communications for WILPF International to share with our members globally. We interviewed other advocates from other organizations and were interviewed. We created connections with other organizations, undertook bilateral meetings, which is meetings with party delegates who have the ability to make change on like a policy level, attended relevant negotiations and side events, and spoke in public to raise awareness of WILPF's advocacy goals. My bilateral meeting with the Ambassador of Samoa, His Excellency Dr. Lutero, who is chair of the AOSIS, which is the Alliance of Small Island States, was the most impactful conversation for me at COP29. We spoke about the monopoly of the global north and the sidelining of the suffering of the small island states, and his composure and intelligence, I wish, was replicated in the global arena. Unfortunately, as you'll see from the rest of this, it was not. So just a bit of background about COP itself and kind of the workings. The Women and Gender constituency, known as the WGC, is one of the 9 official constituencies under the UNFCCC, and WILPF is a member of that. So what that means is it's an official observer, which means that they can speak in party negotiations, working to ensure gender equality and human rights are at the core of the climate action agenda. So it meant that if we were in a party discussion or a party negotiation, as an individual, I wouldn't be allowed to say anything, but a representative from the Women and Gender constituency would be able to, and that would be noted and put on the record and hopefully try and enact some change. So this brilliant group of feminists, some of whom are there, worked tirelessly prior to, during and after COPs. They held daily meetings at 9 a.m, which were a great update and a really helpful overview of all of the negotiations that had happened the day before, and also updates on what would be happening in the day ahead as well. So that was really useful and also a very good networking opportunity to meet with other like-minded people. Now I'm just going to go into some of the WILPF organized side events that were present at COP29. So the first one is what really makes us safe: peace, climate finance, and climate action in an existential time. This side event, which was very well attended, consisted of an expert panel, who you can see in the bottom left, who involved the audience in a conversation touching on peaceful, healthy, and sustainable climate finance to avoid existential rates of global warming. Panelists called for long-term, agile, and flexible finance that will boost resilience and to prioritize local ownership and leadership. Shireen, who is a member of WILPF Lebanon, joined via Zoom, where we could visibly see the screen shaking from bombs going off in the background. Her powerful testimony in the face of unimaginable danger and fear brought many attendees, including myself, to tears. She spoke about how this event was giving her a lot of hope. I've got 2 quotes there also from other panel members, including Harriet McHale Hill, who said how climate is never the sole cause of conflict. It can really exacerbate various stressors such as food security and competition over natural resources. And Andrew Oakham also noted that the impact of climate change doesn't happen in a vacuum, and equity and justice must be integrated. So, go. The next one is a COP of Peace, addressing militarism for climate justice in the Pacific. This panel was hosted by WILPF, Peace Boat, and the Peace and Demilitarization Working Group, and it brought together experts to discuss the connections between peace, demilitarization, and climate justice in the Pacific region, where there's been a lot more progress than the rest of the world. Dr. Sindra Sharma, who isn't pictured in this picture, voiced her frustration over the finance negotiations, criticizing the contradiction between commitments to Indigenous rights and policies driven by extraction. She pointed to the United States' $916 billion military budget as evidence that the resources exist to fund meaningful climate action, they're simply being misspent. Leonard de Klerk, who is pictured there, emphasized how there's a lack of research on conflict emissions, and that makes it really hard to back up our points about it, whilst Dr. George Carter called for the international adoption of human-centered security approaches. Frances Numumu, who is a WILPF member, joined via video, and she stressed the importance of an inclusive, flexible climate financing and prioritizing community-driven approaches and women's leadership. So that was a really meaningful side event. This is myself. This is a peace and demilitarization action. So civil society groups such as ourselves could host actions which were like allowed demonstrations in specific areas of the conference space. So this one was attended by around 40 to 50 individuals, and its location in a busy corridor meant that many hundreds of attendees saw the action as they moved from one area to another. Large WILPF posters were held by myself and the other advocates, and you can see them there on the floor in front of us too. So during this action, I spoke about the gendered impacts of militarism and shared our key advocacy messages for COP29. So this was a really good way to kind of raise awareness of what WILPF were doing, not just with like-minded organizations, but with the kind of party delegates, etc., who were either standing and watching or walking past to their next event. So I spoke about how the link between militarism and gender-based violence cannot be ignored. Within conflict zones and in times of peace, militarism perpetuates the horrifying cycle of gender-based violence. And there's more of this speech on the WILPF International Instagram, if you'd like to see more, but that was a very important demonstration. And it was held on the thematic day for peace, which there was not a huge amount of actual party negotiations to do with peace on that day. It was more so civil society actions. Here are some more civil society actions from throughout the conference. Laterally, in week 2 of COP29, there was a lot more press about civil society's involvement and how they were becoming, I think some of them said, more aggressive and more vocal this year than they had been in previous COPs, due to the kind of frustration and the anger that they were feeling about the disappointing outcomes that were being created. This we saw less so of in week 1, but the kind of building tension and building frustration meant that I was not surprised to see everything kicking off in the final few days and the kind of internal disarray that led to it, because it was very difficult. In the last large demonstration of week 1, which is the feminists demand climate justice picture there on the right, that was a silent protest because everyone was said that they weren't allowed to speak, basically. So it was actually really powerful because advocates were humming, and it was really, really quite moving. And there was a lot. It was a cross-collaborative process. So anyway, here are some key themes from COP29. So militarism, obviously from a WILPF perspective, this was a key theme for us, but it was not discussed enough at COP29. It was raised in more than other COPs, however, due to the ongoing conflicts in Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine. The environmental costs of the escalating Middle East crisis were raised at multiple different points throughout the conference, specifically by civil society organizations, but this was not reflected by the majority of official parties, in fact, who weren't really allowed to speak about the situation in Gaza for the most part. COP29 hosted 1,773 fossil fuel lobbyists, whose agendas are obviously completely at odds with climate justice and who have a direct conflict of interest. This meant that for the 180 participants of the women and gender constituency, we were outnumbered by 10 times by those who attempt to derail climate progress, very successfully in the space of COP29. So despite civil society ramping up the pressure more so in previous years, as we've seen, this attendance being so much more vital, so much more numerous even, obscures the voices of those advocating for feminist climate justice, just in terms of scale. Many advocates and not parties also discussed the location of COP29 and the appropriateness of Azerbaijan as it being the host country. The third authoritarian state in a row to host a COP, Azerbaijan has an economy built on oil and gas exports, and its president Aliyev described oil and gas as a gift from God just earlier in 2024. Fossil fuels make up around half of Azerbaijan's economy, and in early 2024, the president also shared plans for expanding gas production. As I said previously, Azerbaijan's civil society presence was extremely limited. At a strategic meeting with the women and gender constituency, we learned from local activists who will remain unnamed for their security about the concerning human rights record in Azerbaijan, the unequal treatment of women and the LGBTQI+ community, and the silencing of civil society voices through torture, detainment, prosecution, and being forced to flee the country, specifically in the run-up to COP as well. So that's all a bit depressing. So here are some inspiring women who were present at COP29. So you can see Annalise Dodds, the UK Minister for Women and Equalities of the United Kingdom, in the top left, alongside members of the Women and Gender constituency at the Daily Feminist Caucus, and also working together on the floor, which was a common occurrence at COP29 outside of the negotiation rooms, working on some policy drafts. We also have Áine and myself there meeting in our very brief stopover as we kind of swapped and handed over badges together. And then down at the bottom was the most impactful moment for me at COP29, which was this press conference of Indigenous Brazilian women who were calling for urgent action in the Amazon rainforest and solidarity with women leaders like themselves who are defending and protecting their communities and territories, often in the face of murder. Their strength and their grace and the urgency that these women were speaking with was met with a standing ovation in the room. However, it felt very difficult to listen to these women and other marginalized climate leaders sharing feminist solutions whilst just down the corridor in the high-level closed-door negotiations, their very existence was being threatened. Despite these women being at COP29 and sharing their experiences with sympathetic people like myself, their calls continued to fall on deaf ears, and those who really needed to hear what they were saying were not listening. At COP29, I saw firsthand a clear disconnect between the civil society space that we were in and the party negotiations. Within civil society, as you've seen before from the WILPF-run side events, the intersection of gender equality, peace, and climate justice were constantly addressed. Yet in the negotiation rooms and during high-level meetings, it was a completely different picture. It felt like there were two conferences going on simultaneously. One of hope, solidarity, and positive solutions in the rooms where civil society convened, and another in the rooms where the actual decisions were being made, with the latter not hearing the former. This culminated in disappointing outcomes across the board. So we'll go through some of them now. The Baku call on the climate action for peace, relief, and recovery, which was hailed as a milestone initiative, failed to address the elephant in the climate room, increasing military spending. Increased military spending is directly contributing to record levels of emissions of 5.5% from the global military. After a turbulent weekend that led to internal disarray, a last-minute deal on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, which is such a mouthful, was finally agreed upon, and that's the new finance target. This initial proposal of $250 billion annually faced intense backlash from developing countries and civil society, who stated that no deal is better than a bad deal. Negotiations ran on for over 33 hours, with the final deal culminating at 3 a.m. on the Sunday. This polarizing decision, which was adopted without giving countries the chance to formally object, was met with both standing ovations and outrage in the room. We believe that this outcome is disappointing in numerous ways. The agreed $300 billion is $1 trillion per year short of the bare minimum financing needed to effectively tackle the climate crisis. It's completely inadequate. It's strikingly insufficient when compared to the $2.4 trillion being spent on military expenditures in 2023. The text failed to acknowledge the impact of military activity or conflict on climate action, and also lacked recognition of gender and human rights. The voluntary pledges for the fund to responding to loss and damage didn't raise highly enough either, only to 730 million, which just isn't enough. After historic calls for countries to transition away from fossil fuels in COP28 in Dubai last year, parties at COP29 were discussing how to take these outcomes forward, particularly under a UAE dialogue. However, disagreements led to the deferral of these negotiations till next year, which is, again, a huge backlog. Parties did agree to a new 10-year Lima work programme on gender, which is a crucial step to providing a clear blueprint for parties developing gender action plans next year towards COP30. Gender action plans are countries' gender plans, basically. But despite this seemingly positive outcome, backlash and threats of backsliding shaped the consultations. These were the ones that I was present in week one, and the negotiations were marred by hours of pushback from countries, such as Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, amongst others, completely rejected any mention of intersectionality or gender diversity in the draft text, which led to major delays. Sometimes it would be delayed until 9 o'clock at night, that then we would finally go into negotiations, and then they would reiterate what they'd said 5 hours previously, which was that they didn't want any mention of intersectionality in the text whatsoever. This went on for the full first week and is indicative of a wider troubling trend towards anti-gender movements. So what's been happening since then? We've not seen a lot of major progress in the last 2 months since COP29. However, 2025 is a year of major milestones. It's the 10th year of the Paris Agreement. It's the deadline for countries to submit their new nationally determined contributions, which are their individual roadmaps towards national climate action. The second installment of COP16, the Biodiversity Summit, will be taking place in February, and COP30 will be hosted in Brazil in November, which is home to 60% of the Amazon rainforest. Belém, which is, I hope I'm saying that right, is where it's being hosted, is the gateway to the Amazon River. And this presents a rare opportunity to bring global attention to the challenges rapidly unfolding in the region, as well as its pivotal role in providing solutions from local communities. This is a more confusing one, but the advisory opinion of the ICJ on the obligations of states to address climate damage is also expected this year. And this ruling would be non-binding, could be cited in climate court cases around the world, and would be really meaningful going forward. Together with feminists from the Women and Gender constituency, WILPF will continue to push for an ambitious and fit for purpose gender action plan at all of the conferences happening this year. Despite all of those seemingly exciting progress points, there are going to be many continued challenges this year as well. The disappointing outcomes that we saw continue to delay meaningful progress. We're witnessing a deeply worrying pushback from numerous parties and countries against progressive language and making a genuine commitment to gender equality. There is also an increasingly polarized political climate globally, and Trump's second presidency begins next week, which experts are warning will be a major setback to climate action due to his plans to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. We're seeing a wider global increase in anti-rights and misogynistic sentiment, and as we've all seen this week and since January, we are continually seeing the impact of our inaction. Extreme weather is going to continue. Ghana and California are facing deadly wildfires. 2024 was the hottest year on record, and we surpassed 1.5 degrees for the first time, which is a critical threshold that's going to have devastating consequences. And just to kind of circle back to why this is a feminist issue, natural disasters and extreme weathers like this disproportionately impact women. They're over 14 times more likely than men to die in a climate disaster, and women represent over 80% of people displaced by extreme weather. So what can we do? Governments around the world are framing the climate crisis as a threat multiplier. This framing justifies a militarized response to the climate crisis, which is problematic as this will maintain the status quo, which is in direct opposition of what we actually need. We need radical and systemic transformation of wealth and power, which is required for real climate justice. With an issue as large and seemingly insurmountable as the climate crisis, it can seem that peaceful action is not enough and not drastic. However, this is not the case. There are actionable steps towards climate justice that governments and institutions can take that are not unreasonable, not impossible, and do not securitize the issue. So some of these include the following. Governments must reallocate military spending towards climate finance, specifically in line with the Peace Dividend campaign, which I would recommend you look into if you're really interested in this. If all parties reduced military spending by 2% per year over the next 5 years, this would free up $1.3 trillion to be redirected to climate finance. We know that the money is there, it's just being spent on the wrong thing. Despite it not being mandatory, governments must report their military emissions, which will increase transparency and accountability. Governments must also take concrete steps towards an equitable fossil fuel phase-out. Governments and institutions must increase women's meaningful participation in leadership roles, not just in the climate sphere, but across the board. Governments must commission research at a national level to develop climate-conscious policy recommendations. Governments must make financial flows consistent with Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, which sounds very techy, but basically it just means that they should divest and shift money away from any financial activity that is exacerbating the climate crisis, and clearly that includes military spending. Governments must also share their strategies to reduce military spending and increase climate action in their nationally determined contributions. So looking ahead, there are multiple ways that WILPF can build on the momentum of COP29 for their future advocacy. For example, conflict in Gaza and Ukraine are getting a lot of media attention at the moment, and concentrating on the alarming amounts of greenhouse gases that are being emitted and the cost of the rebuild that is going to happen and is already happening in Ukraine is a really important point and really brings home how much money is being wasted at the moment and the devastating impacts of the climate crisis alongside conflict. WILPF could also utilise the disappointing outcomes and the drama and chaos of the final days of COP29 in future advocacy efforts to demonstrate the urgency of the issue and also how inefficient current solutions are. Providing spaces like this today for individuals to speak with other feminists globally and locally, to work collaboratively, virtually and in your local community, empowers our members and those who are not a member yet with information. On an individual level, as feminists, we can all continue to be powerful agents of change, advancing gender equality. We must listen to the Indigenous voices on the front line, as they are the experts and they hold the solutions that we need going forward. We also cannot wait for the political climate to get better, because as we've seen from what's going to happen this year, it's unlikely that that will happen. We need to instead build momentum wherever we can, whether it be local, regional, national, or international levels. We should also continue to care about each other and protect each other in the midst and in the face of these compounding crises. So, overall, COP29 did not inspire any real progress or tackle the rapidly accelerating climate crisis. Despite this, the resilience and the positivity of the fellow advocates that I met and worked with is proof of the inspiring work that can still be done. Thank you so much for listening. I think we're going to move on to the questions and general discussions part of the webinar now, and I'm really looking forward to hearing someone else's voice. Yes, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I just want to state that I'm not an expert. This is just about my experience, and I'm happy to share the slides afterwards. I think that it will be available on the website as well. So thank you so much for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen. I can't hear it.
Sheila, can you unmute yourself?
Yes,
I'm not sure.
I have unmuted myself. Thank you so much, Áine. That was amazing roller coaster covering your experiences and what we need to draw from that experience. As you say, the floor is open for anyone who wants to ask a question or make a contribution. Paula.
Yes, that was a brilliant presentation, Áine. Thank you very much indeed. I wondered, with the gender action plans that are going to be worked on, if different countries are linking with other organisations who do the national action plans for their country, because I'd hate it all to get lost. So I don't know if there's any links. That's my question.
I would say that the Women and Gender constituency have already started planning for it. I think it has to be confirmed at COP30 if I'm not incorrect. Someone can correct me if I am. But they've already, their first meeting was yesterday, so they've already started planning on how they can work together as an official observer with parties. I think there's another meeting beforehand as well that they'll be discussing in person, which is great. So yeah, but there is, but it's mostly through them, I would say. And I can share their Instagram, and they've got, you should definitely sign up to their website and stuff like that as well. They're great.
Thank you.
Burning questions?
I can't find the hand to lift, but I'd like to say something.
Yes, go ahead, Mother.
And I think that civil societies all over the world have now its momentum, because the world is so fragile and insecure, but we are a one, we make a one, and we are consistent of human rights, peace, and see the connection with economics, capitalism, colonialism, new colonialism, to the climate change, which is number one now. And we keep one. We are not unstable, and we must be very, very secure about us, although we have no power, but actually we are very, very powerful. So we work two ways, in a way. We matter, although no power in that traditional meaning that I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I don't know if I made any sense.
No, definitely, no. Definitely. I
But
think
living next to Russia here with 15 NATO bases next door, breaking our sovereignty in Finland, it is a very funny situation. And where we can cling and stress is the humanity, human rights. And we women, we are one in the world about it.
Did you want to say something, Esma?
no, I was just gonna say about the movement, the momentum that she said. And she said, I'm not sure if I made sense. I was just saying, yes, definitely you made. Just agreeing what she said. And I think people in our generation has a really contribution, not to really exaggerate, but I think we are maybe one of the first generations just trying to prevent the future outcomes as well, not just what has been happening, but what's going to happen as well. So I think that makes a huge difference. But I was going to ask you something regarding the presentation you had. You said something about where was it? I just took a note here. Yeah, US Department of Defense, they had the largest funding, one of the budget exceeding 900 billion in recent years. You said there was a conversation over there. I didn't attend the COP in Baku, by the way, although I'm from Turkey, just near to it, but couldn't really go. And I was really wondering if they had any discussion regarding the sentence that was said over there. Like you can allocate that money over there, but you cannot. Like there's an existent funding over there, and then you cannot really allocate the money over there. So what was the conversation over there? Just wonder, because you were physically over there, right, during the conversation.
Yes, definitely. I mean, within the civil society spaces, it just seemed like a no-brainer that there's all this money and it's being spent on military. I think there was a $200 billion increase in US spending from 2022 to 2023, which is 2/3 of like what we're looking for per year from everyone in the world. You know, so the money is 100% there and it's being spent, but there was a lack of acknowledgement from parties in negotiations of this. I'm not sure if it was actually brought up. There was nothing written in text about it. It was brought up in negotiations, it was quickly shut down. Whereas in society spaces, it was brought up as a no-brainer at every single one. You know, like everyone was kind of saying the money is there, it just needs to be moved. But parties were not acknowledging that or kind of engaging with it at all, I would say.
Yeah, that's the point. That's why I wondered, honestly, because everyone knows the fact that they can allocate all that money, and of course they have that funding as well. But if someone brought that up, what was the reaction? What if they discussed it like thoroughly? That's what I was wondering, because you know, like all those resources directed towards all the military rather than existential like challenges like climate change. It's so weird.
Yeah, it feels very hypocritical because whenever you say, you know, there's a climate change, we need more money for it, especially in the UK, they'll say it's not in the budget, whereas it is in the budget, it's just in the wrong part of the budget. So I think that when I was speaking to, like in our bilateral with the chair of IOSIS, we were speaking with parties who were on side, so recognize this, but the countries who are the kind of heavy hitters and who are spending the most on military emissions, such as the UK and Russia, etc., were not engaging with civil society at all. So you couldn't really get close to having that conversation with them, which I thought was also a really interesting part of COP, the kind of disconnect between people who were making a lot of the decisions and then the civil society. Like I said about the fossil fuel lobbyists, their presence just meant that, you know, we were completely shut out from certain conversations and the doors were closed for all the decisions that were being made.
Yeah.
So it was a frustrating like space in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, but I've seen before, by the way, I worked in the UN, European Union delegate system in Turkey for the climate side of it as a climate envoy, and we had the same voluntary and then the charities as well. But what I've seen, all these lobbyists also, like they change their form. How can I say that? I don't know. One of the most dangerous things, they look like they're like, you know, basically greenwashing. They look like they're one of you, like they look like they want the same thing, and they're literally existing over there in all those discussions, and you cannot really differentiate. So dangerous. So just wondering, I basically know that they're not going to openly discuss this, of course. But if someone said that, and then what was the reaction? That's what I wondered. But anyway, thank you so much for explaining some other questions, but I will wait for others too.
On that subject of lobbyists, there has been the idea mooted that there could be, they could either be banned or there could be a quota for the representation of lobbyists. Have you heard anything about that? Do you want to say something about that?
I haven't heard anything about that, to be honest, but I would probably be on board with it, considering how overwhelmed we were with lobbyists there. It just feels so counterproductive. And like I said, silences the voices of advocates who are wanting to actually make change. So I haven't seen that, but I'll definitely look into it.
Were you aware of who the lobbyists were when
Not unless I was speaking to them, but like I said, it was also kind of separated, like the civil society was kind of kept to itself, and then, you know, party discussions, often civil society would be the first to be asked to leave. If there was like an overflow room of the negotiations or whatever, you'd be watching it on a screen, or you wouldn't be even allowed into the room to watch it on a screen, you know, so.
Yeah. And also correct me if I'm wrong. Also, like, as you know, they're all zones, and probably in the negotiations they are not allowed. You can go with the civil societies like charities and stuff, but you cannot really attend the substantial negotiations. So probably there were a list of organizations who can attend, and I think we must really monitor all those groups and people attending there so that you can see who is literally contributing those negotiations. But sorry, someone's gonna say something.
Exactly. Ludmilla, sorry if I said that wrong.
Go ahead, Ludmilla.
Thanks very much. Apologies for the delay. Just a little early in the morning for some of us in Australia to get going. I just wanted to thank you so much for the presentation. It was really comprehensive, and I think reminds us of a real complexity of what we're also involved in as WILPF. I know some of you, but I'm the Asia Pacific Regional Representative on the WILPF International Board. And I also wanted to thank you on behalf of WILPF as an international organisation for participating in the COP and taking the story and bringing it back to us, because I think that that's part of the concern that I have as we look at 2025 and into the future as well. We've got some major international meetings coming up, not only the next COP, but just in a very short space of time, the Commission on the Status of Women meetings, where the agenda for the next 5 years is going to be set. We've got the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security, UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which is a major pillar of the kind of work that WILPF has been doing for so long. I was wanting to hear from you specifically in terms of the links between what you learnt, what you observed, and what you've suggested to how WILPF can build on what the work of WILPF at the COP meetings and take it into CSW, take it into the next COP, and reinforce these really strong messages, particularly the messages around militarization and military spending. I'd really be interested in hearing from you specifically in terms of the COP recommendations, but also from everybody else who's on the call, because I think this is something we don't leave just in the UK, or we don't just leave in the Pacific, or we don't just leave in Australia. We really need to bring our voices together and find some concrete ways to move these discussions and highlighting the really important messages for now and in the future. And I wanted to say that we only have to look in our own backyards, as many of us are in Australia, during this fire season, but also in this really major change of climate that's taking place on a daily basis, and looking at the impacts across the globe. So really interested in hearing from across the group, but I really wanted to make a point of saying thank you so much for the presentation and really clear, strong messages, and let's find a way to utilize those messages in many of the international and national discussions that we need to have this year, 2025. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's really lovely. And a really important question as well. I think that there's a few ways that I can think of off the top of my head of kind of sharing this information more broadly. And I think that the way that it was done at COP29 in the face of adversity was done well. So myself being a younger advocate from Scotland, and then Áine as an older, more experienced advocate from Norway, that kind of combination worked quite well on a few different levels. Obviously, it would have been wonderful if we'd been there at the same time. It would have been less stressful for just a one person to do it. However, having two people there at different experiences of the weeks was great. Seeing that kind of difference in skills and, you know, organizations as well. So just having that presence there, firstly, having the kind of age difference and the experience difference as well also really helped. So I kind of came into it with a more comms strong side and tried to kind of really make a lot of content that could be shared widely with the WILPF network, whereas Áine focused more on making connections with other organizations in the second half as well, which was, it worked really well. So having the kind of combined approach, and also a combined approach in terms of different aspects of WILPF. I think that as WILPF UK, it's great that we meet quite regularly, and WILPF Scotland as well also meets regularly, but it's less likely for us to meet with other WILPF members from across the world. And it is a global organization, it's international, and it's fantastic that we've got people who are up at 6 o'clock in the morning from Australia here, but that kind of global, you know, collaboration is really important. And this kind of gave us the opportunity to both attend something and then go back to our respective countries and then also collaborate. So we've got another webinar, I think next week, that Michelle Benzing, who's a WILPF International coordinator, is organizing. So that'll be even more WILPF members who can attend and learn and speak together. And it kind of opens up those doors, because if we're here, then we're all feminist and we're all engaged in this topic, and we have different skills that you wouldn't hear about if it was, you know, Shireen, who's in WILPF Lebanon at the moment. She's perhaps a bit busy, but, you know, other, you know, countries and stuff like that, and building those connections globally. So that, I think, is a really important part. I do think that to involve more youth is really important. And I think that doing that in a way that makes WILPF look exciting and interesting and really fundamental and important can be done. And, you know, the climate crisis is a great way to go in there. There's a lot of youth advocates. I mean, you've got the classic Greta and others who are, it's one of the more known advocacy spaces for young people. So it's a good way to engage young people. And another way to do that is through social media and ensuring that that all runs smoothly and that there's, you know, resources for young people to engage with that they would actually want to engage with. The WILPF International team did a really great job of that. So kind of working closely with them as well is important. So those are a few, I would say, so kind of cross-working between WILPF groups, cross-group working between ages, social media increases. I think that's everything that I said. But yeah, we'd love to open
Very good, very good. Well, now I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. because I don't know anyone else in the UK who saw in today's Guardian that Nigel Farage, who for other people heads up a very right-wing group which has actually got itself into Parliament at the last election. He and Liz Truss, an ex Prime Minister from the Tories, were launching an organization, let me see if I can see what their name was, something called Heartland UK, and it had come from America, and basically they are climate deniers. Now, we're talking to each other, we're talking to ourselves. Are we forgetting that out there are still climate deniers? And how do we get out and change the thinking in the general public?
That's a really good point. Again, as we saw at COP29, we were kind of speaking in our own little echo chamber, and we're all guilty of it on social media as well. It looks like we're all making a lot of difference, but then there is the other side of it where people are just not engaging with it or outright denying it, as you say. So it's really difficult, and I think it's going to become a lot more difficult with Trump as well. And that was kind of the general consensus at COP. However, I think that there's ways to do it, and it does start locally. I would say education, you know, really getting out into schools, young schools, you know, primary school, speaking to children about it, speaking to people in your local community about it, hosting talks, hosting webinars like this, etc. And kind of not entertaining the fact that it could be something that could be denied. I mean, we can just look at LA or, you know, anywhere at the moment where we're seeing these, you know, unbelievable climate disasters. And that, I think, is actually raising awareness of it as well. So I wouldn't like to wait until more climate disasters happen, but I do think that that will change public opinion when it starts happening in the global north. We're seeing it in America. We're going to start seeing it here soon. You know, as soon as it starts impacting, you know, the white colonial powers, they're going to start changing their minds about it. However, until then, we need to just ensure that we're educating and making our voices as loud as possible. But you're right. I'd love to know what other people think about raising awareness in the face of that genuine like denial.
I can say something if there's anyone. Okay. So I think another aspect that we need to discuss, which is I think also dangerous. As you said, we talk to each other, we talk to people like us, we talk to the organization that carries the same thing, but we don't see the other people's opinions and views. So for our generation, mostly the phones, the social media, the algorithm also feeds that back. So whenever I watch the video that I agree with, I keep watching the same kind of videos or the post as well. So mostly the people who are denying or who were exposed to those kind of contents, they will be seeing more contents like that, and that just spreads the misinformation. And you even see people who are claiming that they are scientists, and then they say that just because they've been denying climate change, they are not really able to work because they've been just, you know, just sent in USA, for example. They say I cannot really find a job because I don't agree with them. So it's a lie that people generally just say, make you want to believe, but it's not correct. So people really slowly started believing those kind of things, hearing from other people, but just we just shouldn't deny the existence in the online platforms, let's say, in the medium. So sharing knowledge and sharing what you learn, or just, you know, producing more content, trying to reach out to especially young people because these are the platforms they use. I even, for example, I used to, like, I didn't really have any idea about TikTok, for example, until last year. I had to just download and just check what they're doing and, you know, trying to see, because that's what they use, for example, or Instagram or LinkedIn. And you see people literally claiming that the world is flat, it's not real, or just, you know, climate justice is not real. So I think that's another important aspect, because no one, like, not really everyone has the access like we have through these conversations, discussions, or, you know, work we do. So that's the thing I would like to contribute.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. in terms of mis and disinformation, and as you said, the algorithms. So the people who are climate deniers, they get more and more feeds about it. And I think what the older generation needs to do is they need to teach the young ones about what are credible information sources.
Yeah.
And they need to get their grandkids into listening to accredited sources like the BBC. Now in Australia we have the ABC, but we also have SBS, which are the two main public channels. And you know, maybe once every 6 months there might be something that's a bit dodgy, but it gets called out. And then the TV has to apologize and make sure that it's corrected. So I think really, you know, these giant tech companies are all out for money, and we have to be educated of
Yeah.
what are legit sources.
Yeah, and also they have the mass companies, they also have the budget that we cannot really believe if we see literally huge amounts, and they just spend all this money on advertising and marketing, and secretly, even in the USA, if you remember during the Trump's election, it was all manipulated. So you can see these algorithms and lobbies literally spending money on those organizations for you to see those kind of contents or whatever they want you to believe. So fact checking is another important skill. Like you need to check if it's a fact or not, but mostly young people don't know that. So in the education, as she said already, we need to just start educating young people, especially I see from my sisters, for example, from their classmates. They don't know about just checking that information. So if you don't know that, how you're going to make sure that when they come to 20 years old, 25 years old, they're just going to believe those things they've seen because they just consumed all those contents.
Can I say something? I can't find the hand. But I've been stressing the meaning of the language, the words and concepts. So if we keep up our language that connects people in education and as mothers, I have 14 grandchildren. So I try to keep the old traditional food, everything that is kind of traditional and connects people. And so we don't have to go, although we need TikToks and everything, but what we don't want to lose is the language of peace, language of love, language that keeps people together. I'm a community worker, and I am making a kind of research about human picture and human concept. And the picture is how we work in daily life. And the human concept is more abstract, goes to Greek philosophy and Latin proverbs, although Rome was very militaristic, that is not an example. But if we lose the language with these new kind of equipments, we lose everything. And it's our power, it's our kind of weapon. But to try to avoid militaristic language, that is a choice. Thank you.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think someone has to do that. Yeah, sorry.
No one you.
No, I was just saying, like, we don't have to use those things. We don't have to be in those platforms. Just knowing, I think, as you said, I appreciate the fact that you have, like, you said 14 grandchildren. And yeah, as parents, as mothers and grandmothers, maybe different responsibility, another burden on our, as a family, but still thinking about those, like, being really careful and being, like, observing the children or maybe young people, the best tool as organization, especially just targeting them, maybe just trying to give a suggestion in regards to online platforms.
100%. Yeah.
While we're on the call from Australia, do you want to keep it directly on COP, or do you want a snippet of our environmental news?
Well, go ahead. We'll love to hear from your environmental news.
Okay, so a quick rundown. I'll try and be brief.
Yes.
In 1999, so a while ago, there was something enacted in Australia called the EPBC Act, which is the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. Now that got reviewed, it gets reviewed every 10 years, and it got reviewed basically throughout COVID by a guy called Graham Samuel. Anyway, so when the present political party got voted in back in, I think it was 2022, they promised to edit the EPBC Act, and they basically had a platform for environmental change. Anyway, so the legislation was just before Christmas was supposed to be passed on the EPBC Act. And the changes were that Australia has a federal EPA, which would oversee the whole country in terms of environmental issues, and they would feed back to the government. The legislation also included having basically a data body to collect environmental data so that scientists could make more informed decisions. And then the legislation also enabled the EPA and the information body to have more strength, basically compliance measures. So that went before Parliament basically November, December last year. But the Prime Minister was lobbied by Western Australia, the mining industry, and the Prime Minister got a phone call from Western Australia not to let the environmental measures go through. And so the Prime Minister did a captain's call and took the legislation off the table. So that's, yeah, a little bit. So the EPBC Act does cover the states in terms of logging, but many years ago, they dissolved that power and the states created their own regional forest agreements. And that's been a problem. I won't go into that, but the one thing that everyone loves, koalas. There was supposed to be 10 years ago an area put aside called the Great Koala National Park. And unfortunately, that area has been logged and continued to log. And there's just been a letter that's gone before the New South Wales government about still creating that Great Koala National Park. So yeah, it's still being logged and it still hasn't happened after more than 10 years. So that's a bit of a rundown.
But outline more clearly what the EPA or EPBCA or whatever it is, what conditions was it upholding? What is it that has been set aside?
So the Environmental Protection Agency was in the Samuel review. Graham Samuel suggested that Australia has environmental standards. So an EPA would have been working to uphold the standards. So that actually wasn't part of the legislation, but that was the point. The point was to uphold standards. And actually, the discussion was the federal environmental minister presently has veto rights, so they can veto a decision and do whatever they want basically, and environmentalists wanted that veto ability to be taken off the table. So that environmental issues really did fall under the new EPA. The other issue from the Australian Conservation Foundation was, with the new EPA, was it going to be led by a CEO? And we didn't want that because we felt that a CEO would be too easily lobbied. So we wanted Australian environmental decisions to be made by a council structure rather than a CEO. I don't know if that answers anything, but
yeah, that's fine. Good.
That's really interesting. And I think it just kind of shows how potentially the kind of COP system can be a little outdated, because if you look at the detail of every country's climate actions and the individual, processes and issues that everyone's facing, how can, 1 week a year and one thing a year adequately tackle everything in that kind of space? And in the kind of negotiation setup, it does seem to be too stagnant and the processes take too long. It's too formalized in certain arguments. There'd be no way of getting to the kind of nitty gritty that's obviously necessary. In the Australian case as well, especially, and in countries that are facing immediate climate emergencies. So yeah, I think it speaks a lot to the kind of outdated COP system as a whole.
I suppose one other thing, which is horrible, but it's probably good for you to know, is that the other aspect of Australia's news is there's something called the Beetaloo Basin, which is about 200 kilometres south of Darwin. I think that's right off the top of my head. And that's gas fracking. And now everyone's been working here about no new coal and no new gas. But not only did the Beetaloo Basin get the go-ahead, but a precinct, it's called the Middle Arm Precinct, and it's basically a gas processing facility 14 kilometres away from Darwin. So basically, the Beetaloo Basin fracking facility was going to be pumped up north to Darwin and processed there. Now, the government was saying that the process facility in the Middle Arm, they were saying that it was renewable projects, but that was greenwashing. They weren't renewable projects at all. A member of ours looked up who the companies were, and they were all fossil fuel companies. So we've had that, which hasn't been resolved. And the other thing that hasn't been resolved, 3 coal mines were given licenses by the Federal Environmental Minister to be expanded. So there's a bit of work to be done here.
Yeah, it just feels like we're saying one thing at COP, and then we're in Azerbaijan and everyone's talking about how important it is and everything, and the actions that the country itself who's hosting COP, it's just in complete disarray, and it's the opposite of what they're saying, and the same with the Australian delegates as well who were there. It's very difficult. I think one point that I'd probably make as a kind of overall one to kind of lead back to what we can all do is kind of acknowledge the gender gap in the climate sphere. So 2.5 times more women than men are active on climate issues, and 60% women are 60% more likely to advocate for social good than men are. So those are quite like large statistics of the kind of difference. And I think it just says that we need to think about how we engage men in the climate crisis and how we engage them in our advocacy and in the work that's being done, because predominantly the men who are making the decisions at these high level discussions are men. We've seen that at COP, we've seen that across the board, yet the women are the ones who are putting in the work on the ground and the ones who are advocating for social good. So we kind of need to somehow find a way to kind of involve more men at the social good aspect, involve more women at the kind of high level decision making aspect of it, and yeah, try and find that kind of balance, I guess. So I was wondering if anyone had anything to say about that. Ludmilla, I'm sure.
Yeah, Ludmilla.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think that's a really important point, as we also find in the militarization and disarmament space as well. So the gender peace gap is quite a critical space, I think, for us to think about working more in. The question is, how do we do that? I also I'll come back to that in a moment, but while I'm thinking about this, before I lose it, was there any discussion about issues related to displacement and migration issues, and how that might start to come up as COP discussions? I'm thinking in particular of the major issues that are already forming themselves in our region across the Asia Pacific. Did that come up at any point? And was there a gender element to that as well?
Within civil society, that came up a lot because they talked about the gendered aspects of displacement as well. It's a lot more dangerous for women to be climate refugees and refugees in general. They also spoke about how, you know, in the areas that you're speaking about, many people are losing everything they've ever had. They're losing their homes, and there's nowhere for them to go. But on a larger scale, that did not happen. Again, party level, it wasn't being discussed. Oh, sorry. Up there. At a larger party level, it wasn't being discussed, which seems silly because it's, you know, leading to all these kind of economic issues, again, more climate issues, etc. So no, it wasn't raised as widely as it perhaps should have been. However, I think that COP30, it will be raised more, and that's because it's been happening now, as we've just seen, in LA to white, very privileged individuals, and, you know, a huge amount of art has been lost, a huge amount of, like, I think the property damage is like in the billions and billions, due to the kind of really wealthy nature of the neighborhoods that have been affected. So I think that at COP30 we'll be seeing an awful lot more of the kind of displacement, you know, argument and what to do with climate refugees, etc. How, you know, it can happen overnight, as we've seen. So yeah, I'd be really interested to see the difference between last year and this year, because I think it'll be a stark increase.
I think so too, and it's so connected into the other kind of anti-democratic authoritarian debates and actions that are taking place, that with a specific backlash against migration issues across many different so-called democratic countries, this is going to become an increasing issue, interconnected with the peace issue and interconnected with climate. So it's also thinking about how to lay some of that groundwork within WILPF and the other discussions that we have, so that we're actually, because I like that idea that was mentioned earlier about building forward in terms of identifying these issues which have been identified for some time around migration, but making that that connection really powerful. Yeah, thanks for that.
And I think there is a race element to it as well that we have to acknowledge. You know, my previous role at a homelessness charity for asylum seekers and refugees, it was at the start of the Ukraine war, and we had a huge influx of individuals looking to host a refugee because they were white and they were from Ukraine, and they could kind of, you know, I don't know what the reasoning behind it was, but we saw on a day-to-day level about the treatment of individuals if they're a climate refugee based on the color of their skin, or a conflict refugee. So I really think that that's something that has to be brought into all the discussions, and also trying to involve people who have also been in these situations as well and are, you know, have that lived experience is so crucial. I think obviously, unfortunately, that wasn't possible today. This isn't the space for that conversation. We're speaking about something else. However, having that kind of giving those opportunities to the people with lived experience is so important, and using our voices as I don't want to speak for everyone, but like privileged white people who are in positions of safety and potentially power to kind of amplify the voices of those who have lost their homes and who have, you know, faced unimaginable hardships due to the climate crisis or due to conflict and militarism. That's really important, and that's something that WILPF can do really well due to being an international organization, is kind of making those global connections that we wouldn't otherwise, and really raising up those voices. So I think that's really key.
Just one thing on climate refugees from Australia. We will be accepting basically anyone from Tuvalu, which is an island. I think it's in the Cook Islands. So we will be taking in anyone from Tuvalu who wants to come to Australia. That was an agreement.
Yeah.
Yes, let's see how that actually works out in practice. Yeah.
And also the fact that even has to happen in the first place is just so disappointing, you know. So
exactly so, because it's one of the small group of nations that have signed up to the idea of a United Nations treaty, a non-proliferation of fossil fuels. And I wondered, Áine, if you wanted to say something about their presence at COP, because WILPF is signed up internationally and here also in the UK with that campaign. And it's really been quite significant internationally. Did you come up against them at
Yes,
COP?
I did. I attended one of their drinks receptions on the final night of week 1, which was very well attended. We turned up maybe half an hour late and it was completely full. And we were speaking to other individuals there who were obviously speaking about the progress they'd made that week. I think they were saying that around 3 countries they were quite sure were going to sign up. Could be wrong on that, but I think it was around about 3 just from the kind of conversations that had been happening that week. And then they were obviously speaking to a lot more. They had quite a large delegation, I would say, like they were well equipped for COP, and they had these events and also hosted a lot of actions, like the civil society actions as well, that were really well attended. So they definitely showed their mark, you know, they made their mark at COP. I would just say though that that was also in the face of 1,773 lobbyists for the exact opposite, who also have the budgets double whatever, you know, the nice drinks reception was. These guys were playing a different ballgame, you know, so hopefully it made some aspect of a change. But I think within these kind of multilateral spaces, we do have to be realistic and think about the kind of backroom things that are going on, what's happening at the, you know, dinners that we're not being invited to and stuff like that as well. So because they are happening, especially in COPs, you know, there's a huge amount of money being put into it, that a lot of the civil society spaces aren't seeing. So I think that that's a really, you know, back yourself to the Fossil Fuel Society because they did a fantastic job in the face of a huge amount of adversity.
Thanks, that's very interesting. Now, there's a number of people on this call who haven't had a chance to contribute, and as we're getting towards the time when we're winding down, I would like to invite anyone who hasn't asked a question or made a contribution to come in now. And Áine's been very good at incorporating all the ideas you've been bringing up. So do bring up your ideas. Well, here in the UK, we've got a very active a group that is working on climate justice, and we're always looking for new members to join us and come up with ideas. And we've also got a very active group that is letter writing, and we're always looking for people with ideas about letters. I mean, this article showing me, at any rate, that climate deniers are still around, really looks as though it's something for us to write to someone or other about, certainly to try and write to The Guardian about. So I'm putting that in people's heads to be thinking about.
I think, is it Marie? I don't want to pronounce it wrong. Do you have something to ask?
I think your voice cracked.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Maghrib, and I'm Climate Justice Officer from Stan Amnesty. I've been trying to observe you all in the beginning, so I thought, you know, it'd be better to like observe and listen to your experiences rather than me talking. I live in England as well, but I'm originally from Kashmir, which is a disputed territory it's basically in the middle of India and Pakistan. I'm not sure if many of you know about that. And you know, my father. He's a very good. He's a very well-known journalist as well, and he's been working quite hard and on Kashmir, war conflicts, and you know, a lot of things related to human rights, for example climate justice as well. And you know, from my own experiences, I have like been experiencing a lot of things. Have like personal conversations with people who have been living on the line of controls, who have been more, you know, affected by the use of weapons, and you know, and who have been more affected with the conflict. So you know, if anytime you need someone to, you know, you need someone who you want to talk to who has more experience, I can always talk, and you can always contact me if that's fine.
That sounds so interesting. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that contribution.
That's fine.
And I think I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name.
Anya.
Anya, I'm so sorry. Anya was saying something, but also her voice has cracked. I couldn't understand what she was saying. Can you say that again if you remember?
Me? Oh, I was just
Yes. The last thing you were saying, you were breaking up.
Sorry. Oh, I don't remember. I was thinking about Kashmir.
Sorry. Yeah, by the way, Margaret, we're in the same team, yeah, from Amnesty as well. But sorry, we just
No.
I was just wondering what you were saying as well.
Fine.
That's all right. Okay. If you remember.
About the letter writing campaign and how that's really great. It's a great
Oh
group.
yeah, letter writing. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely if you're a WILPF member or if you want to be, I would recommend joining.
Promoting.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
No, but about the work you do in organization, I honestly, I know I checked and just looked through what you've been doing. And when I received the invitation from our community, I think the email was sent to Amnesty, and then Amnesty, one of the staff members, they sent us. And then I had the chance to check what we've been doing, but I'm not really that knowledgeable, I'll be honest. So I'll be checking. And also if you need help in that regard, then probably I can contact to one of you here, but I don't have your emails. I have this email, if that's okay to contact.
Definitely. You can pop it in the chat. And then
Eliza, I guess.
Eliza. Yeah.
Eliza, yeah.
I think
yes.
Yeah, she sent that email, so I think I have only her email address.
Well, she would be a good contact person, definitely.
Yeah, then we can just reach out to see how we can help and contribute.
Yes, and I would like to say that WILPF, which is, as I said at the beginning, an organization of more than 100 years, and
it's
all.
Probably my ignorance. I'm so sorry.
No.
I don't normally live here. I've been living here for the last 3 years, so probably
Yes.
my ignorance. I'm so sorry.
Well, all I wanted to say was that, as you can see, we're international. We've got members joining us from Australia and from Finland and so on. And that is marvelous for us. But anyone who wants to join us here in the UK, all you need to do is visit our website and get all the information you need about WILPF, and so that you can be active in some of our campaigns. And apart from climate justice, we have active campaigns on women, peace and security, Security Council 1325, and we have active campaigns on demilitarization and against war, and we're out on the streets, as I mentioned at the beginning, protesting against all the things that are going on. And we are living in a really difficult time, and possibly going into even worse time with the what's happening in the United States. So I'm very encouraged to see so many of you here and ready to participate, and here's your last chance to say something if you want to say something before I wind up for the evening. It's been really lovely to host you, and very, very grateful for Áine being so communicative and so clear in her ideas, and able to interact with whatever people have brought up. So anyone else? Any other contributions? Do you want to say any closing words, Áine?
Sure. Just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for attending. I really appreciate you taking your evening and listening to me. So I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for sharing as well afterwards. I feel like that was a really useful and informative conversation for all of us. And yeah, just continue to engage with the climate crisis. It starts with all of us. And even if you feel like it's a bit too much or whatever, doing a little is better than doing nothing at all. So
absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this event and inviting all of us. And also thank you, Áine, for such a nice presentation that you had. I took some screenshots when I had the chance to catch, but if you're gonna send that would be really good so that I can share the feedback with my team as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Áine, and everybody else. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It was so beautiful. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you so much.
Take good care of
too.
yourself, your family, the world, all the women, all the flowers and trees. Thank you. Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you.